With me today, we have four gentlemen who worked for a company called Ionics. On my immediate right is Mr. Ark Pang. Next to him is Bill Katz, and Eddie Geishecker, and Bernie Mack. Bill, I'll ask you, since you were one of the early members of the company, how did Ionics come about?
Well, Walter Judah, who is unfortunately dead now, was really the technical brains behind Ionics. And he was born in Germany, and because of the Hitler thing, he had to get out. As I recall, he went to France at that point, where he met his wife, who I think had an important role during the war in undermining the Nazi thing. But he finally got over to this country. I didn't know exactly how, because I didn't know him in those days. But as soon as he got here, he began to do some work at MIT. And I think that's where he came to the attention of George Dorio, who was the big man of American research and development, out of which Ionics was formed. And so I think that's probably enough to say about that. But Walter Judah was a very important man, because he really came up with the idea of the electrodialysis membrane and started that work. But Tedgar was a very, very important man in the development of the overseas market, which turned out to be the big market for desalting.
Right, right.
Yeah, I worked as the inside person for Ted for quite a number of years. That he was running around the world when they do all the calculations on the plant and make sure the proposals get going, while Ted was getting the information and doing the running around.
Yeah, because you in the early days, the 50s and 60s, I guess, primarily, you sold a lot of equipment into the Middle East.
Yes.
Somebody, I think,
right.
Floyd Mellor told me one time, like 700
700
plants or something like that.
All through the Middle East,
Yeah.
from North Africa right to Baghdad.
Right.
But Ted Guile basically pioneered almost all of this.
I think the first major taste of RO was the seawater BOT project we did at Maspalomas. And it was a major project.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was sort of, we pioneered as Ionics, which many people don't know, we pioneered the whole concept of seawater desalination and selling water, and we would own it. We would own it.
I remember that.
In those days, we would balance sheet the financing, or we put as recourse financing. Today, we always look for non-recourse financing, but that was the start. And then I think from that start, I went on to, with Ionics, and now with the work I'm doing now, looking at investment projects to sell water.
Right.
Well, I think today the market for electrodialysis that people are looking at is how to reduce the demand or reduce the need for a evaporator. If you want to go to zero liquid discharge, can you concentrate stuff until you can go to a crystallizer?
Was there an issue with the molded spaces?
I don't really remember.
There was a tolerance on, talking to Tom Kirkham, there was a tolerance of thickness on the spacer. And it was very difficult by molding them to keep that within the proper tolerance. And they couldn't mix it with the die cuts.
If you don't have the proper tolerance, that stack sort of leans.
The thing is, if you looked at the molded spacer and really examined it very closely, what happened was that the mold, because of the molding process, the high points were always in the same place. So that when you assembled the stack, yes, you could play around a little bit with it. You had some degrees of freedom, but when you built the stack, you tended to find that there was a high point in the spacer, in the assembly, and you had a hard time sealing the
You
stack.
couldn't seal the stack, right, right.
So it went through a lot of iterations of how do you put the spacers in. There's 4 orientations of the spacer, but you can manipulate some of those high points out.
When Ark mentioned Barcelona, which is a huge plant, did you ever think that one day electrodialysis would be used in a plant of, 70 MGD?
Yeah, that's
Or did you think that was beyond the capabilities of the technology?
Oh no, I didn't think that there was anything. I mean, it was just a question of how many stacks you would use, and I think the more stacks you had, the more you could set up a stack repair facility on site. I never thought there was any limit like that.
And then even when RO was becoming commercialized, RO had its scaling issues and various issues which didn't quite fit well in the Middle East, and we continued selling in the Middle East because they were high scaling waters. But with the higher salinity waters, the better understanding by RO how to control the scale with the anti-scalants, and the higher power consumption of the EDR, you saw that shift sometime in the 80s, that shift that was making it much more difficult. And it was inevitable that Ionics would be an RO EDR company.
Ionics, and you've already mentioned it in passing a couple of times, but Ionics was one of the early, if not the earliest, firm to pursue, build, own, and operate facilities. How did you decide to get into that business?
I recall, in 84, 85, we got the mandate from the board that, because we were selling equipment. We were all packing a suitcase, going around selling equipment, and that we wanted to go into the what we call 50-50 strategy, where half our income will come from service business. So we got the mandate, I think, for $100 million from the board in 84, 85 to go out and get us into the service business. That's when you went out and looked for Pure Solutions and Ultra Pure and the ion exchange regeneration business. We went into the AquaCool bottled water business. That was all part of this. We got to get into the service business, and a spin-off of that was to look at, rather than selling equipment to water merchants, we'll be a water merchant. Because a lot of water merchants in the Middle East made a lot of money from our water that we produced for them, and we began to say we should be able to sell this water. We have the technology. So we did that at Maspalomas. We did that throughout the Canaries, Santa Barbara, whenever there was an opportunity. Then there was the Hama project that we did in 2004. But I think a very significant project, spin-off of the triple membrane system, UFRO, is we took that and we went and did a major water reclamation plant. At the time, over 100 million gallons a day. Still today, one of the largest plants, using treating secondary treated water, using Norit membranes, followed by Torre membranes, which we half made in Boston, because we had the joint venture to make Torre membranes also. We dabbled in that also. And that plant's still up and running. And
that was in Kuwait, right?
In Kuwait.
Yeah.
In Kuwait, we treat 60% of Kuwait City's sewage water conventionally, and then with UFRO. And now we're going to take that plant and take it from 375,000 cubic meters a day. And the next 18 months, we'll be treating 600,000 cubic meters.
And what do you do with the product water?
The product water goes out, and because it's such high quality water, one of the original concepts was it was going to be utility water, or general water for landscaping. It's used basically for produce farming in the region.